Have you ever felt like you can see things other people can't? You notice the tension in a room before anyone speaks. You sense when someone's smile is fake. You catch the little cracks in their voice, the flicker in their eyes, the weight they're trying to hide. And the truth is, you can't turn it off. At first, it feels like a gift. You think, I understand people better than most. I can see their truth. But slowly, it begins to feel like a curse. Friendships fade because people feel exposed around you. Conversations feel empty because you see through every mask, and the more clearly you see, the more isolated you become. Carl Jung called this differentiated perception the rare ability to perceive what others can't, to see unconscious patterns with startling clarity. He called it his most dangerous discovery. Not dangerous because it's wrong, but because seeing everything comes at a cost few can bear. In his clinical work, Jung observed people who could sense the hidden emotions of everyone around them. They weren't delusional. They weren't unstable. They were too conscious. So conscious that their very presence disrupted the illusions that keep society functioning, and for that they suffered. But here's the paradox. This ability doesn't have to destroy you. If you learn how to integrate it, Jung believed it could transform you into something extraordinary, a pioneer of human consciousness, someone who helps the world evolve. In this video, we're going to explore Jung's most dangerous discovery, why people who see everything often feel cursed, and how you can turn this overwhelming gift into the very thing that sets you free. So let's begin. Imagine walking into a room full of people. Everyone else is laughing, smiling, chatting casually, but you notice something they don't. You catch the tiny tremor in someone's hand as they hold a glass. You see the forced smile that doesn't quite reach another person's eyes. You sense the tension between two people who pretend to get along, and in an instant you know what's really going on. For most people, small talk is just that small, meaningless exchanges. But for you, every word carries a weight, every gesture hides a story, every silence screams louder than the conversation itself. You're not trying to analyze. You're not even looking for it. You just see it. At first, this feels like a superpower. You feel like you've been given special access to the truth. You can tell when someone is lying. You can sense when someone is secretly hurting. You can predict how situations will unfold long before anyone else notices the warning signs. But over time, the gift starts to feel like a curse, because once you see behind the mask, it's hard to unsee it. That friend who pretends to be happy, you feel the despair they hide. That colleague who acts confident, you sense the fear underneath. That family member who insists everything is fine, you feel the storm brewing inside them. And here's the problem, they don't want you to see it. Most people live inside what Carl Jung called the collective illusion, the unspoken agreement to wear masks, to keep things smooth, to ignore what's uncomfortable. But when you pierce through that illusion, when your very presence threatens to expose the truth, people begin to push you away. They call you too intense. They say you overthink everything. They accuse you of making problems where none exist. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right. And that truth terrifies them. This is what Jung described as differentiated perception, a rare ability where the unconscious contents of others are perceived with extraordinary clarity. It's not madness. It's not imagination. It's a heightened awareness, a deeper consciousness that cuts through appearances and exposes what lies beneath. But Jung also called it dangerous, because those who see too much often end up isolated, not because they're broken, but because the world isn't ready to confront what they reveal. Think about it. Society runs on unspoken rules. We pretend not to notice the lies that hold groups together. We overlook the flaws in those we admire. We avoid saying what we really feel because we fear rejection or conflict. These illusions keep relationships, workplaces, and even entire cultures functioning. But the person who sees everything disrupts those illusions simply by existing. Jung observed patients like this in his clinical work, people who could describe others' hidden motives with shocking accuracy. They weren't delusional. Their insights were verified again and again. But instead of being celebrated, they were avoided, misunderstood, even scapegoated. Why? Because seeing too much makes others uncomfortable. The curse is not in the perception itself, it's in the consequences. The clearer you see, the lonelier you become. The sharper your vision, the heavier your burden. And here's the cruelest part, even you can't escape it. You can't shut off the radar. You can't go back to ignorance. You carry the weight of truths nobody wants to hear, and you feel the tension of secrets that were never meant to be spoken. This is why Jung called it dangerous, not because the ability itself is harmful, but because it sets you apart from the collective, leaving you stranded between two worlds, the illusions everyone clings to, and the deeper reality you can't stop. Zing. So let me ask you this: if you recognize yourself in this description, if you felt the loneliness of seeing too much, what do you do with it? Do you hide it? Do you suppress it? Or is there another way forward? So why does a gift like this, an ability to see so deeply into others, so often feel like a curse? Why do those who possess it end up drained, misunderstood, even broken? Jung spent years searching for the answer, and what he uncovered was unsettling. He identified three profound dangers that turn perception into pain. Danger 1, disrupting the collective illusion. Every society, every group, every family survives on a silent agreement. We don't say everything we see, and we don't question everything we feel. We smooth over the rough edges. We keep the peace by keeping secrets. But when you have the ability to see beneath the surface, you can't help but notice what others are working so hard to ignore. You become the one who points out the elephant in the room. You notice when the leader is lying, when the family dynamic is toxic, when the relationship is falling apart, even though both people are smiling for the cameras. At first you might think telling the truth will help, but instead you're treated as the problem. People accuse you of being negative, dramatic, or judgmental, not because you're wrong, but because you've broken the spell of collective illusion. Jung warned, the individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends. In other words, you become dangerous to the group, not because you harm it, but because you expose it. Danger 2, the isolation of superior perception. Seeing more than others is lonely. Imagine being at a party where everyone is enjoying the music, but you can hear a high-pitched noise that no one else notices. You tell them about it, but they laugh. They don't hear it. They think you're exaggerating. Eventually, you stop saying anything. This is what Jung called the problem of the superior function. When your greatest strength sets you apart, it becomes the very reason you can't connect. People don't want to be around someone who sees through them. They want comfort, not confrontation. So you begin to feel like an outsider, even among those closest to you. Friendships feel shallow. Relationships feel strained. Workplaces feel suffocating. And little by little you withdraw, not because you don't care, but because the constant dissonance is exhausting. Jung described it bluntly. The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. Danger 3, losing yourself. Perhaps the most dangerous part is what Jung called identity dissolution. When your perception is so open, you don't just see other people's emotions. You feel them. You carry them in your own body. You start to confuse their anxiety with your own, their sadness with your own, their anger with your own. Over time, your boundaries blur. You stop knowing where you end and others begin. Jung called this participation mystique, a dangerous state where your identity becomes fused with the collective unconscious. In this place, you don't just see too much. You risk losing yourself completely. Think about it. How many times have you felt drained after being around certain people? How often have you carried emotions that weren't yours, only to realize later that you were absorbing the energy of others? For the highly perceptive, this isn't occasional, it's constant. And if it's not managed, it becomes unbearable. The silent cost of perception. This is why Jung considered this ability dangerous. Not because perception itself is bad, but because without integration it isolates you, overwhelms you, and erodes your sense of self. It's like being given the ability to breathe underwater, but without the lungs to survive it. What should be a gift turns into suffocation. And here's the heartbreaking irony: society needs people like you. Families need someone who can see the truth. Relationships need someone who can feel what's really happening. Cultures need visionaries who can see what's coming before it arrives. But the very thing that makes you valuable is what often makes you rejected. The gift becomes a burden. Jung saw this again and again in his patients. Those with heightened perception weren't unstable, they were drowning in a world that refused to acknowledge what they saw. And unless they learned how to manage it, this gift would destroy them. So the question becomes, what exactly makes these individuals targets of attack? Why do others react with such hostility to someone who simply sees the truth? Jung had an answer, and it has everything to do with the shadow. If you've ever been blamed for things you didn't do, criticized for simply speaking the truth, or treated as though your very presence is too much, you've experienced the dark dynamic Jung called shadow projection. The shadow we refuse to see. Every one of us has parts of ourselves we don't want to admit, the anger we suppress, the envy we deny, the weakness we hide. Jung called these rejected pieces the shadow. Here's the problem: the shadow doesn't disappear just because we refuse to see it. Instead, it waits silently in the unconscious until it finds a mirror in the outside world. And that mirror often happens to be the highly perceptive person who sees what others deny. You become the screen onto which others project their hidden flaws. They accuse you of being judgmental when really they're judging themselves. They call you negative when in truth you've simply named the darkness they've been running from. Jung said it clearly: everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most people don't want that kind of understanding. It's easier to attack the mirror than to face the reflection. Why perceptive people become targets. Imagine this. A woman senses that her friend is deeply unhappy in her marriage. She gently asks, "Are you okay? You don't seem yourself lately." Instead of appreciation, the friend lashes out, "Why are you always so negative? You're imagining problems." Or picture a man in a workplace who notices the toxic power games between colleagues. When he points it out, he's labeled a troublemaker. He's told he's creating drama when all he did was describe the reality everyone else feels but refuses to name. This is the scapegoat phenomenon Jung described. The one who sees too much becomes the one everyone blames, not because they are wrong, but because they make the hidden visible. And in groups, families, workplaces, even entire cultures, the hidden is what keeps the fragile balance intact. The cost of being the mirror. When you see too much, you often feel like the designated villain in every story. People distance themselves not because of who you are, but because of what you reveal without even trying. It's exhausting. You wonder, am I the problem? Do I create negativity? But the truth is, your perception is simply too honest for those who aren't ready to face themselves. Jung observed that groups unconsciously choose a scapegoat, a person onto whom they project all the negativity they cannot acknowledge in themselves. Families blame the difficult child. Workplaces blame the disruptive employee. Societies blame outsiders or visionaries. And more often than not, that scapegoat is the one who sees with clarity. A double-edged sword. So here lies the paradox. Your ability to see beneath the surface is both your greatest gift and your greatest liability. It allows you to understand human beings in ways most people can't, but it also makes you the lightning rod for their projections. Jung's patients with differentiated perception described this over and over. They walked into rooms and felt the unspoken tension. They voiced what no one dared say aloud, and then instead of gratitude they were punished. Because when people are forced to confront their shadows, they often turn on the messenger. It's not you they hate. It's the part of themselves you remind them of, turning the projection into power. But here's where the transformation begins. Jung taught that when you understand projection, you stop taking it personally. You realize that the anger directed at you often has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of another person's war with themselves. This doesn't make the pain disappear, but it gives you clarity. Instead of drowning in blame, you can step back and see the dynamic for what it is: unconscious people attacking the mirror, not the truth behind it. And with this awareness comes choice. You can choose not to absorb the projection. You can refuse to become the scapegoat. You can hold your perception with strength, not as a weapon, but as a quiet source of wisdom. Because the real danger is not that you see too much. The danger is when you allow others' fear of their shadows to make you doubt your gift. Jung believed that those who survive projection without collapsing under it become some of the most powerful individuals in the world, not because they avoid conflict, but because they've learned to stand in truth, even when truth is attacked. Every extraordinary gift carries a dangerous edge. For people who see too much, perception can either destroy them or transform them into something far greater. Jung saw this truth not just in his patients, but in towering figures of history, and even in his own life. Nietzsche, the collapse of an unintegrated visionary. Take Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who could cut through illusions with surgical precision. He saw the hypocrisy of religion, the hidden will to power in human behavior, the cracks in Western morality, long before anyone else dared to admit them. At first, Nietzsche's insights seemed prophetic. He became famous for lines like, "God is dead not as a celebration but as a diagnosis of a culture already crumbling from within." He saw too clearly too soon. But Jung pointed out something crucial. Nietzsche never learned to integrate his vision. He identified with it, almost became possessed by it. His insights turned into a burden too heavy for one man to carry alone. Instead of channeling his perception into healing, he wielded it as a weapon against the world. The result, isolation, madness, collapse. Nietzsche's superior perception exposed him to truths so raw, so unfiltered, that without grounding he drowned in them. For Jung, Nietzsche was the warning: seeing everything without integration leads to self-destruction. Meister Eckhart, the mystical integration. Now contrast that with Meister Eckhart, the medieval mystic. Like Nietzsche, he saw beyond the illusions of society. But unlike Nietzsche, Eckhart learned to integrate what he perceived into wisdom. He didn't throw his insights like stones. He translated them into parables, sermons, and guidance that ordinary people could digest. Instead of overwhelming others with the raw force of his vision, he offered it gently like a lantern in the dark. Jung admired Eckhart because he embodied what he called conscious humility. Eckhart understood that seeing too much is not a license to dominate, it's a responsibility to serve. His perception didn't isolate him, it nourished his community. Where Nietzsche collapsed under the weight of his vision, Eckhart became a channel for transformation. He proved that perception could become medicine rather than poison. Jung wrestling with his own gift. And then there was Jung himself. In 1913, after breaking with Freud, Jung fell into what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He began experiencing visions, dreams, and overwhelming perceptions that nearly drove him to psychosis. He admitted later, "I was menaced by a psychosis," and was saved only by the knowledge of what was happening. For 6 long years, Jung kept detailed notes of this inner chaos, notes that would later become the Red Book. Instead of suppressing the visions, he engaged with them consciously. He painted them, dialogued with them, turned them into symbolic narratives. This was Jung's genius. Where Nietzsche identified with his perception and collapsed, Jung differentiated from his perception and transformed. He didn't become the visions. He learned to relate to them, to integrate them. And from this dark night of the soul, Jung emerged with the foundation of analytical psychology, the shadow, the collective, unconscious individuation. His own survival became the blueprint for helping others survive their extraordinary perception. The choice we all face. So here's the paradox: seeing too much will either break you or make you. Nietzsche saw and broke, Eckhart saw and healed, Jung saw and transformed. And this is the same choice that every highly perceptive person faces. Do you collapse under the weight of what you see, resenting the world for not understanding you? Do you withdraw bitter and alone? Or do you, like Jung, find a way to integrate, turning perception into clarity, shadow into wisdom, isolation into service? Jung called this process individuation, becoming whole rather than overwhelmed. He insisted that the danger wasn't in perception itself, but in failing to develop a conscious relationship with it. Because when you integrate your gift, you stop being its victim. You stop drowning in what you see. Instead, you learn to hold it, shape it, and use it not just for yourself, but for others. And here's the truth Jung wanted us to understand. The world needs people who see. It needs those who can pierce through illusions, who can name the shadows everyone else avoids. But it needs them whole, not broken. Integrated, not isolated. That is the razor's edge. That is the difference between destruction and transformation. When Jung looked at patients who could see through masks, sense hidden emotions, and absorb the atmosphere of a room, he realized something: the danger wasn't their perception, the danger was their lack of integration. Think of it this way: perception is like a floodlight. When it's uncontrolled, it blinds you and overwhelms others. But when you learn to direct it, when you put a lens around it, it becomes a laser. Focused, powerful, transformative. That is the work of integration. Jung developed a 3-part path for this. Not theory, but survival. Phase 1, recognition and differentiation. The first step is deceptively simple. You must learn to recognize what is yours and what is not yours. Highly perceptive people often absorb everyone else's feelings like emotional sponges. You feel sadness that isn't yours, anxiety that didn't begin in your body, rage that belongs to the room, not to you. Jung called this conscious discrimination. Without it, you drown in other people's unconscious material. So how do you practice it? Solitude. Jung advised his patients to spend intentional time alone, not as avoidance, but as calibration. In solitude, the borrowed voices quiet down. You begin to hear your authentic self again. Ask yourself, does this emotion belong to me, or did I absorb it? If it's not yours, release it. If it is, face it. This small act of recognition is the first wall of defense against overwhelm. Phase 2: Shadow integration. The second step is even harder. You must face your own shadow. Here's the paradox Jung uncovered. The reason you notice other people's shadows so clearly is often because you haven't fully integrated your own. The unacknowledged parts of yourself resonate with what you see in others. That's why their flaws disturb you so deeply. That's why their masks irritate you. Shadow integration means admitting, I too am capable of envy. I too can deceive. I too carry anger, weakness, selfishness. This doesn't make you bad. It makes you whole. Because once you acknowledge those qualities in yourself, you no longer react with such intensity when you see them in others. You can observe without judgment. You can perceive without being pierced. Jung put it this way: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Practical step: journaling your triggers. Every time someone irritates you, ask, what does this reflect about me? Over time, this turns the sting of projection into the gold of self-knowledge. Phase 3: Conscious participation. The final step is what Jung called conscious participation, engaging with the unconscious world without being swallowed by it. This means you can walk into a room, feel the tension, and still hold your center. You can hear someone's hidden pain without absorbing it as your own. You can see the shadow without being cast in it. Jung taught his patients to become what he called psychological containers. That is the ability to temporarily hold the unconscious material of others' fears, wounds, projections, without losing your own identity. It's like being a deep river others can pour into you, but you remain steady, never losing your current. The tools for this: boundaries, self-knowledge, and creative expression. Jung himself painted and wrote during his Red Book period not as art for the world, but as containers for overwhelming perception. For you, it could be journaling, music, movement, or prayer, anything that holds the weight of what you see so it doesn't consume you. The gift of integration. When these 3 phases come together, something remarkable happens. You stop being a victim of your perception. You stop asking, why do I see so much? Why do I feel cursed? Instead, you begin to say, I see, I understand, and I can use this wisely. Integrated perception turns you into what Jung called a bridge, someone who connects the unconscious with the conscious, the shadow with the light. You become not just a mirror that others attack, but a lantern that helps them see themselves. This is why Jung insisted individuation wasn't just personal therapy, it was evolution. Each integrated person adds to the consciousness of the whole, the price of the path. But don't mistake this for an easy journey. Integration requires courage. It requires letting go of illusions about yourself. It requires tolerating solitude, criticism, even rejection. You will lose people who only wanted the version of you that absorbed their shadows without question. You will be accused of being distant, arrogant, or too much. But this is not the cost of being broken, it's the cost of becoming whole. Jung's patients who walked this path discovered something extraordinary. When they integrated their perception, they were no longer destroyed by what they saw. They could stand in storms without losing themselves. They could feel pain without collapsing. Nothing outside had the power to annihilate them anymore. There's a reason why some people walk through life with unshakable calm, even when storms rage around them. It's not because they've avoided pain. It's not because they're stronger than everyone else. It's because they've discovered the one force Jung believed was more powerful than any trauma, any rejection, any shadow. That force is consciousness, the power of awareness. Most people live on autopilot. They feel emotions they don't understand. They react to triggers without knowing why. They're controlled by memories, wounds, and unconscious fears they've never faced. And so they suffer, not because life is cruel, but because they remain unconscious of what shapes them. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Think about that. Every word that cuts you, every betrayal that stings, every rejection that leaves you hollow, these things only devastate you because they awaken something unconscious inside. If you don't know your wound, the world will keep pressing on it. But the moment you bring it into consciousness, it loses its power to control you. Consciousness as a shield. Imagine walking into a room where someone criticizes you. Without consciousness, their words slice through you like a knife. But with consciousness, you step back and ask, why does this hurt? What wound does it touch? Suddenly you realize the pain is not about their words, it's about the childhood memory of never being enough, or the insecurity you've been carrying for years. And once you see it, truly see it, the spell breaks. This is why Jung called consciousness the ultimate shield. It doesn't prevent people from attacking. It doesn't erase pain, but it transforms the battlefield. What once destroyed you becomes material for growth. What once enslaved you becomes a mirror for liberation, the double-edged sword. But here's Jung's warning. Consciousness is not just a shield, it's also a burden. To be conscious means you can no longer hide behind ignorance. You can no longer blame the world for every wound. You must take radical responsibility for your inner life. That's terrifying. It's easier to stay asleep, to point fingers, to keep calling pain bad luck or fate. That's why so few choose this path. Consciousness is freedom. Yes, but freedom demands responsibility. From victim to creator. Let's return to Jung's patients. The ones who drowned in perception lived as victims. They felt cursed by what they saw. But those who chose consciousness stopped being victims and started becoming creators. When someone projected onto them, they no longer absorbed it blindly. They observed it, learned from it, and decided consciously whether to engage or let go. When shadows surfaced, they didn't collapse in shame. They faced them, integrated them, and became stronger. When life hit them with chaos, illness, rejection, loss, they didn't ask why me, they asked, what is this teaching me about myself? This is the transformation Jung lived himself. Consciousness turned his near psychosis into the foundation of his life's work. It turned isolation into insight. It turned darkness into a map for individuation. The silence of the strong. Here's what consciousness looks like in daily life. Someone insults you. Instead of firing back, you stay silent, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. A friend betrays you. Instead of drowning in bitterness, you see their actions as a reflection of their wounds, not your worth. A door closes. Instead of spiraling into despair, you ask, what part of me is being asked to grow through this loss? This silence, this detachment is not coldness, it's sovereignty. It's the silence of someone who cannot be manipulated anymore because they know their triggers too well. Consciousness doesn't make you untouchable because you feel less. It makes you untouchable because you understand more. The gift of seeing clearly. And this is the great paradox. Jung uncovered the very ability that once threatened to destroy you. Seeing everything becomes your greatest power once it's integrated through consciousness. Instead of drowning in perception, you channel it. Instead of being the scapegoat for projections, you become the one who shows others the truth about themselves. Instead of collapsing under shadow, you turn shadow into wisdom. You become, in Jung's words, a carrier of the living spirit, a person whose very presence raises the consciousness of everyone around them. And the world desperately needs that. Not more people on autopilot. Not more victims of unconscious wounds. It needs conscious individuals who have turned perception into clarity, shadow into light, pain into transformation. The final step. So ask yourself, how different would your life look if instead of reacting unconsciously, you chose to meet everything with awareness? How many arguments would dissolve? How much energy would you save? How much peace would you reclaim? Because here's Jung's truth: nothing. And nobody can ever hurt you in the same way once you've made the unconscious conscious. Pain may visit, but it will not own you. Loss may come, but it will not define you. Consciousness is not escape, it's not denial, it's not armor. It's the ultimate shield, because it transforms every blow into an opening, every wound into a doorway, every shadow into a teacher. So, here we are. We've walked through Jung's most dangerous discovery, the rare ability to see everything others miss. We've seen how it can isolate you, turn you into a scapegoat, and nearly destroy you, but also how it can transform you into something extraordinary. Jung taught us that the danger isn't in what you see. The danger is in failing to integrate it. The shadow only controls you until you face it. Projections only wound you until you understand them, and pain only enslaves you until you bring it into consciousness. Once you make the unconscious conscious, everything changes. You stop being a victim of your perception. You stop collapsing under the weight of what you feel. Instead, you become a bridge, someone who transforms pain into wisdom, shadow into strength, and perception into a gift that can guide not only your life but the lives of others. And this is your choice now. Will you let your gift drown you as it did Nietzsche? Or will you rise like Jung and Eckhart, turning perception into clarity and clarity into freedom? Because the truth is, the world desperately needs people like you. People who can see what others ignore. People who are willing to carry the light of awareness into the darkest corners of the human psyche. So I leave you with this question. Are you ready to stop running, to stop hiding, and to finally embrace your gift with consciousness? If this message touched you, if it stirred something deep inside, write it in the comments. I choose awareness. Let's see how many of us are ready to step into this new level of being. And don't forget, this is only the beginning. In the next video, we'll dive even deeper into Jung's insights and uncover more hidden truths about the human mind. So subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join me on this journey. Remember, your gift is not your burden. Your unconscious relationship to it is your burden. Learn to carry it consciously, and nothing and nobody will ever hurt you the same way again. This is not the end. This is your beginning.